after listening to this early combination, now we are venturing and treating heart failures in our clinic as diabetologist. And it started way back on, this is a photo of Stockholm, and it's not done by Google. It's a real picture of fall colors in Scandinavian countries. So 18 September 2015, actually, what happened, the EMPA-REG was published. And that's how the diabetologists actually entered into the field of heart failure. Otherwise, we used to give some treatment. And of course, we used to refer to the cardiologist for the further thing. But with SGLT2 inhibitors, which actually showed a significant reduction in heart failure hospitalization. EMPA-REG was high risk, but even the Butler paper says the low-risk patients from EMPA-REG, they also benefited. Canagliflozin showed that even with the preserved ejection fraction patients of type 2 diabetes benefited, and even DECLARE, which was a mainly study for the low-risk patient, it also decreased heart failure. So overall, these drugs actually reduced. And if you know, all these trials had only 10 to 11% of patients who had a known heart failure. So almost 90% of patients never had any history of heart failure. So still this came out as a very significant kind of observation and conclusion. So anti-diabetic medicine, which is working for heart failure, started. So not only these CVOTs are helping us to understand drugs or complications better, the CVOTs are also helping us to understand the disease better. There were not so many articles about heart failure before EMPA-REG was published. Now, if you see any journal, it's full of, and we are understanding heart failure much better, which we treat every day, and which we see so many patients in our clinic. Still, it is underappreciated. As we all know that CVOT, primary outcome, there is no heart failure which is included. Primary outcome is non-fatal MI, non-fatal stroke, and CV mortality. So it's not studied as a primary outcome. Now there are trials which are on the way and few are published. So looking at diabetes, which we are having almost every clinic, more than 50% patients of a physician are having type 2 diabetes. So heart failure is one of the first manifestation if you compare other cardiovascular diseases. If you look at the patients who are getting admitted, because of different cardiovascular problems, heart failure tops the list, and it is much more common in women, and it is early in life. You can say that with the slight, only within 5 years duration of diabetes, more women are getting admitted with heart failure. Among the heart failure, almost 55% are preserved ejection fraction, which is again difficult to diagnose and difficult to perceive. And that is the population actually mainly what our clinics are full of. If you see overall mortality or the worse outcomes with heart failure patients, with low ejection fraction, it is the worst for diabetes and low, that is understandable. But diabetes and preserved ejection fraction is still bad, worse outcome compared to no diabetes and low ejection fraction. So someone is having diabetes, your echo shows some 55% of ejection fraction, and if she's an obese lady of 50 years old, then if she's complaining of fatigue, like there is a case in my presentation, then we need to be aware that this can be preserved ejection fraction heart failure. So of course we can treat it by treating hypertension, statin with some things. Treating glycemia may not help. And we know the relationship of glycemia and heart failure, there is a correlation. If your A1C is more than 10, then it is much high compared to A1C below 6. Each 1% rise in A1C in type 2 diabetes, 8% increase risk. But by treating glucose, are we decreasing the risk of heart failure? We do not know. And it's like a both way bidirectional relationship. And there are no studies which show that if you have an intensive glucose control, it will reduce heart failure. We do not know, except some aspect of Origin trial have shown where the newly diagnosed patients were treated with glargine with high CV risk, but it was not designed to study heart failure. So it's a frequent, forgotten, and fatal. Now we can't say that in last few years, all the journals are full of heart failure papers. As I was mentioning, it is bidirectional. There are studies which show that patients admitted with chronic heart failure, they develop impaired glucose tolerance, and there are pathophysiological mechanisms which create glucose intolerance if someone is having heart failure. And of course, we know diabetes itself pushes someone. So there are many thinking initially. Now the thinking is that the new thinking that restrictive and dilated cardiomyopathy are two distinct forms. And we know that diabetes, it affects endothelial cells, it affects endothelial dysfunction or atherosclerosis. At the same time, there are microvascular vessels which can get affected. Routine cerebral atrophy, which we see on scans, are actually the microvessels which are getting affected in type 2 diabetes. Similarly, in myocardium, it can be metabolic as well as cellular disturbances directly. And that may be the reason SGLT2 inhibitors are helping these myocardial cells a lot in patients with heart failure. So metabolic problems, myocardial involvement, the myocardial cells as such, advanced glycated end products, microangiopathy, all these things in a diabetes person with autonomic dysfunction, there is a myocardial dysfunction, and then to categorize heart failure as a simple cardiovascular risk is not there. It's completely a different entity, additional entity. So CV risk may be atherosclerotic, plus there is a heart failure. So we need to look into that. Diagnosis is difficult mainly by symptom. And now we should also start doing these NT-proBNP studies in our clinics, at least in some patients, to diagnose this preserved ejection fraction. Though it was initially, we all know about acute settings, but in the chronic settings, sometimes when you are in problem, we should do. We will have more about it in the next talk when Dr. Sathi is going to speak about treatment as such, but we should start looking into NT-proBNP studies. So she's a lady about 55 years old, diabetes 10 years, she's an obese, good blood pressure, microscopic albumin in the urine, and other things are okay. A1C is 7.8, GFR is 70. And she's on glimepiride, metformin, canagliflozin, telmisartan, cilnidipine, aspirin, statin, everything. She complains of lots of fatigue, shortness of breath. The routine assessment which we do showed an ejection fraction of 50%. CT angio showed a mild disease, which we do a lot, especially in women, to know what is happening. She's on standard treatment, not much benefit. I sent to her a cardiologist. His comment came back as add SGLT2 inhibitors. So I need to explain that this brand, whatever I have written, is canagliflozin, and it is also an SGLT2 inhibitor. But what else? Should we do NT-proBNP? Can we use ERNI in such cases? Let's see about the evidence about ERNI drugs, a few aspects of those trials. So we really need good kind of a diagnostic test. Someone is complaining of fatigue, and just a 2D echo may not tell us that what is exactly happening. So I think there are a lot of good tests, but their interpretation is difficult. That's what everyone is telling when you're trying to do some research protocol. But very soon they will come and it will be available for our routine clinical practice beyond a 2D echo, especially like stress thallium or diastolic stress test. Now, preserved ejection fraction is the largest unmet need, and if you see the standard graph, which again shows that it is more common in women compared to men. Women get it earlier in life, like maybe 5 years duration of diabetes or at a younger age compared to men. If you see the mortality, it is less in preserved ejection fraction compared to low ejection fraction, that we know. The Paradigm trial was a trial for low ejection fraction, and Paragon was for a preserved ejection fraction. So you can see that mortality was less in preserved ejection fraction kind of a protocol, but heart failure hospitalization was same. So one of the outcome or the problems with heart failure with the preserved ejection fraction, the admission rate for hospitalization was same. The quality of life which the patient suffered was almost as bad as low ejection fraction. Among the low preserved ejection fraction, when the ejection fraction goes from say 55 to 50, the number of events actually increased in Paragon. So maybe there is some relationship as the ejection fraction goes down, the comorbidities of heart failure increase. The symptoms and signs in preserved ejection fraction are sometimes they are more, and the quality of life is also suffered with the patients of preserved ejection fraction. As there are lots of data which again will show that it is more common in women, the heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And the slide, I think it's readable, but the outcome with preserved ejection fraction in women is worse compared to men. So one needs to have a high suspicion of index if your patients are having not low ejection fraction, but they are suffering with maybe fatigue or shortness of breath. So Paradigm, I'm not going into the details of this trial because this was drugs sacubitril valsartan, which was used below 40% of ejection fraction. And we all know that these are the class of drugs which came as a very important treatment of patients of heart failure with low ejection fraction. We all are using it. You can see they have a reduction beyond RAS blocking drugs, and that's why they are helping our patients. Within few days or weeks, patient starts feeling better. So if you look at these, some sub-analysis of paradigm heart failure, whether patient has diabetes or no diabetes, there was about 34% of patients in paradigm. All patients had an ejection fraction below 40%. The outcome of the primary endpoint was significantly reduced, whether it was diabetes or no diabetes. Like subgroup p-value was not significant there. Improvement in the quality of life was again significantly reduced in patients with diabetes. There's some different effect this sacubitril valsartan is doing in patients with diabetes. What it was is that there's a reduction in A1C. There was a significant, the group which received ERNI had a low A1C compared to those who received only enalapril. So improvement in A1C was more in ERNI patients, and deterioration was less, those who received sacubitril valsartan combination, and need of putting the patient on insulin over the years was much less. So they are helping the glycemic control in some way, and there are lots of mechanisms which have been proposed. One is, of course, we know that directly they act on DPP-4, so they act by improving GLP-1, but there are other mechanisms, maybe through bradykinin, and there is a valsartan in that, but sacubitril per se, neprilysin inhibitor, has a good effect which improves insulin sensitivity, improves GLP-1, and has some effect on the glucose. The commonest patients where we deal with his low ejection fraction is, of course, diabetic nephropathy, and this is the outcome and the readings from the paradigm. There is no adjustment is required if GFR is 60 mild, and if you see the complication rate, hypotension was more with ERNI, increase in creatinine or increase in potassium and cough was seen more in the enalapril group. Why? Because all our patients are on both these drugs. All are on SGLT2 inhibitor and all are on ERNI. So we need to be aware, and so many of our patients have moderate or decreased GFR, so one needs to be aware. So whom are we treating as a diabetologist? So it's a good study which shows that if there is a type 2 diabetic person and his A1C is under control, systolic blood pressure, diastolic, cholesterol, albuminuria, everything is taken care of, normal weight, he is exercising. Such a type 2 diabetic person, if he is compared with a non-diabetic person, what is his risk of dying? Slightly less. MI may be slightly actually better for such a well-controlled type 2 diabetic person. But see the hospitalization for heart failure, it is still 1.5 hazard ratio. So it is almost twice for the risk, though your patient is well controlled on all the major risk factors for cardiovascular risk. So that is the risk for all our patients of type 2 diabetes who have risk. And our patients are diagnosed at young age. So that is one more thing I would like to have your attention to, this paper of Nabil Sattar, which was again from Stockholm, it is Sweden. It's from the Swedish National Diabetes Registry, a very, very interesting observation, which actually changes our thinking. So what they did from the lakhs of patients' data, they compared that why these patients are dying. So if you see type 2 diabetes, those who got diagnosed at a younger age, they are dying more for cardiovascular diseases compared to non-diabetics. So getting diabetes at younger age, there is a more risk of cardiovascular death. Plus, then they had a comparison. If someone is getting diabetes diagnosed after 80 years of age, 70, 60, or someone is at very young age, maybe 40 or less, which we see every day in our clinical practice, you can see the risk of mortality is much higher in these patients compared to non-diabetics, rather than having a diabetes diagnosed when it is 60 plus. So getting young diagnosis at a younger age, 40, 45, is bad to have a more mortality, more cardiovascular mortality, more cardiovascular disease. And of course, if you see the hazard ratio for heart failure in this young age group, it's almost 5 times higher, even in patients who do not have a prior heart disease. That's how that cohort was analyzed. And we met Sattar and for some kind of workshop for his paper. And he has tried to replicate this data from lots of different registries. Because I asked, many of these younger patients were not white Caucasians, that's what they say. And, but he says every time he is getting the same results, whether the registry is from maybe from Korea, and maybe it is from other parts of Europe. So we need to be more aware of heart failure as such in our clinical practice. Also the preserved ejection fraction, one needs to need a high index of suspicion. We need to always discuss these problems with a treating cardiologist with whom you are working, and that is important. So just to summarize, it's a highly symptomatic chronic condition, which is a preserved ejection fraction. It actually has a lot of bad effects on quality of life. There is an increased hospitalization even with preserved, as well as reduced, there is an increased mortality. Until recently, there was no therapy. But if you know, Paragon heart failure, which was the same sacubitril valsartan, was used in patients with preserved ejection fraction. In women, it was a significant reduction. So though it is not recommended, I am just putting this question, can I use ERNI in this case, which is having a preserved ejection fraction, though Paragon came as a negative, but the comparative molecule was valsartan. So there are some school of thought that this may be helpful in women especially because of the Paragon results which were published in 2019 ESC. So what I feel as a diabetologist, we need to be aggressive in cardiovascular risk assessment of our patients. We need to have an active role in treating reduced ejection fraction patients because we are using SGLT2 inhibitors and ERNI, and a lot of our patients have compromised GFR. There should be a high index of suspicion for preserved ejection fraction, and we need to be after our cardiologist colleague to give us some answers about them. Aggressive treatment of cardiovascular risk, which we know recently aspirin has been changed. We were treating aspirin, though ADA never said don't use. We were using in very high CV risk as a primary prevention. So aggressive treatment of cardiovascular risk is mandatory, and we need to go beyond just saying yes or no of ASCVD. This will not, life is not black and white. Just saying no and then neglecting that patient is not correct. If ASCVD is no, then we need to find out what is extremely high risk or a moderate risk or the low risk. Thank you so much.